Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, continuing the paper that I've posted on Tarpley.net, Obama is preparing to bomb Iran. It is a break in the situation and not for the good. We've got all kinds of reports in the European press about the coming use of Saudi territory. Negotiations between Israel and the Saudis for overflight privileges, right, that the Israeli Air Force can fly over Saudi Arabia to strike Iran. They really need that, otherwise very hard to do, and all kinds of articles about this. Let's get to the specifics. Paula Sleer of Russia Today in Jerusalem on the 28th of June says Israeli helicopters are dropping off material at Saudi bases. Verno Shea of Voltaire Network cites the Fars, Iranian news agency, that Israeli military activity is going on at the Saudi airport of Tabuk. Would seem to be that Israeli and U.S. forces are permanently on the ground. Well, U.S. in any case, but now Israeli also. Quite an embarrassment for the regime. One wonders whatever happened to Prince Bandar, who tried about a year ago to influence the succession in a pro-Russian direction. We've got the London Times on June 12th saying that Saudi Arabia is testing how to stand down air defenses to enable the Israeli jets to make the bombing run. London Times, July 5th, that the head of the Mossad is telling Netanyahu that Saudi Arabia will let you fly over. So documentation on that. Notice in passing that the last time around we had Chirac and Dominique de Villepin saying non to the war and undercutting the neocon U.S. propaganda. Now we have Sarkozy, the product of that CIA Wisner household, who is the worst of all, worst European of all, on Iran, right? The only thing worse than bombing Iran is Iran with a bomb, is his slogan. Sarkozy cheers on anything that can go in the direction of war, and therefore we have to welcome this L'Oréal Betancourt party financing, right, political contribution scandal that may be at least weakening Sarkozy, or that's the intent. Notice China. China has been blackmailed by Hillary Clinton, right? They've been told, you better support these sanctions, and they did support the sanctions. You may lose your oil from Iran, but if you don't support the sanctions, the Israelis will attack, the Gulf will get closed, and you'll lose not only Iran, but Saudi Arabia also, and Saudi Arabia sells them more. So China, on the surface, they're opposed, but not very emphatically. Now, we've just had large U.S. armada going through the Suez Canal, 11 vessels, the battle group around the carrier USS Truman, and this was facilitated by Egypt to, keep small boats away. Don't want any small boats coming alongside because they may be loaded with explosives. Fishing boats were kept away from the Suez Canal. So there are, I think right now you have to assume 2 U.S. carrier battle groups in waters near Iran. That's always an important consideration. We also have to remember the Israelis now have 3 nuclear ballistic missile submarines, the Dolphin, the Tekuma, and the Leviathan, and we're told that at least one of these ballistic missile submarines is in the Gulf. Now, these could be used for a first strike and also for retaliation because the warning time is virtually nothing in terms of the first strike. So the Israeli Navy with a permanent nuclear ballistic missile threat in the Gulf. Ironically, these submarines manufactured by Germany. Now, the U.S. has forces in 11 countries within striking distance of Iran. Let's go through the list. Places where the U.S. has forces: Afghanistan, Turkey, Pakistan, Kuwait, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkmenistan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is that Manas Air Force Base. Right now, there are no U.S. air base. There is no U.S. air base in Uzbekistan, but the U.S. has been pressing over the last year or so to reopen the former base in Uzbekistan. Of course, the Turkish NATO bases, very formidable. U.S. forces in Azerbaijan. Hillary Clinton went to Azerbaijan, trying to line them up for war, we think. U.S. forces are in Armenia. That caused a big stir in Pastaran. And the Pastaran also mobilized against the report that the U.S. and the Israelis were in Azerbaijan. So you can see, if you look at the map, and that's indispensable, you see that Iran is essentially being encircled. Now, this encirclement is supposed to be a factor of strength, but it involves scattering a lot of forces who are operating in isolated areas with bad logistics. The forces are fragmented. This can backfire. I talked on the evening last Sunday, July 18th, talked to a retired U.S. Navy captain who had spent his career in nuclear ballistic missile submarines with Admiral Hyman Rickover. And he said at one point in his towards the end of his career, he participated in an exercise, the hypothesis of which was 35,000 U.S. troops cut off in or near Iran, and the approved answer was immediate use of nuclear weapons. So you can see how this can escalate into the use of nuclear weapons. Now, when we look at it even more closely, whatever the U.S. and Israeli intentions may be, the position is changing in some very, very important ways. First, let's also point out Syria, Hezbollah. Hezbollah, of course, building up a lot of forces in southern Lebanon, very formidable. We'll talk about that in just a minute. In the London Times of April 18th, we're told that the Israelis have delivered an ultimatum to Syrian President Bashar Assad that if Hezbollah starts launching missile attacks on Israel, the Israelis will retaliate directly against Syria. In other words, bomb Damascus if Haifa or Tel Aviv or Jerusalem get hit by missiles coming from southern Lebanon. And we have an anonymous quote from an Israeli minister: "We'll return Syria to the Stone Age by crippling their power stations, ports, fuel storage, and every bit of strategic infrastructure if Hezbollah dare to launch ballistic missiles against us." And they also say, if you join with the Iranians and Hezbollah, we will end the power of the Assad dynasty. So again, take a look at that long list of countries: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan most likely, Yemen. Yemen, you have this insurrection, an Iranian-backed insurrection against the Saudi-backed regime. Somalia, Sudan, overstretch looms big time for the U.S. Now, also, let's look back. The lessons of that Lebanon war, Israel-Hezbollah war of August 2006, this was a defeat for the Israelis. A lot of people didn't understand that at the time, but it clearly was. In many ways, it was clearly a strategic defeat. It was even a tactical defeat in many ways. You can look at the bad performance of the Israeli tanks. But now let's look at how this has changed. What are the upgrades that Hezbollah has made? Well, they're reported to have, in 2006, Hezbollah was able to launch 4,000 short-range missiles against northern Israel. This is pretty much the Russian Katyusha type, right? The Stalin organs of World War II type. They were not accurate, right? These were just terror weapons against urban areas. But now this has changed with the M600 missile, which we'll talk about here in our final segment.